The cold air of the early morning clung to the glass walls of the terminal. The airport was almost silent save for the occasional clack of a rolling suitcase or the quiet murmuring of announcements over the PA system. Amid this peaceful haze, a man stood alone near Gate 37, dressed simply, carrying no luxury bags, wearing no entourage, giving off no aura of power. To anyone passing by, he was just another anonymous African traveler waiting for his flight. But he wasn't. He was Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso, one of Africa's most watched, most powerful young leaders. He had decided to travel like an ordinary man. And yet, in the next few hours, one flight attendant's mistake, a mistake born of arrogance and ignorance, would turn an ordinary boarding into a national earthquake, a humiliation that no apology could undo, and a moment that would echo across 2 continents. So, what exactly happened on that quiet plane to cause a political firestorm? In this video, let's know about the whole story. The first pale light of morning crept across the glass walls of the airport terminal, staining the floor tiles gold. A sleepy hush blanketed the scene. A few scattered travelers clutched their coffee cups, scrolled their phones, or shuffled toward distant gates. Among them stood a tall, calm figure near Gate 37, blending so seamlessly into the background that no one gave him a second look. He wore no expensive suit, no glinting jewelry, no sign of status. Just a simple jacket, dark trousers, and a quiet presence. This man was Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso, one of Africa's most closely watched young leaders. Yet this morning, he chose to be just another face in the crowd. There were no cameras trailing behind him, no advisors at his side, no ceremonial guards. His decision to travel without fanfare wasn't an accident. It was a statement of principle. In a world where power so often insulated leaders from the people they claimed to represent, Traoré believed in staying grounded. A leader who forgets the dust on his boots, he often said, is a leader who forgets his people. Fresh from high-level meetings in Europe where he had fiercely defended Africa's right to its own gold, its own resources, and its own destiny, Traoré now returned to his homeland carrying not only diplomatic victories but the weight of a continent's hopes. Yet none of that showed on his face. As he waited for his flight, he smiled gently at an airport worker passing by. The man smiled back without hesitation, unaware that he had just exchanged greetings with a head of state. Boarding was called. Calmly, Traoré walked forward, handed over his boarding pass without a word. But fate, as it often does, was about to intervene, and across the terminal, an entirely different kind of presence, louder, wealthier, far more arrogant, was arriving, already stirring the quiet peace into a slow, dangerous boil. While Ibrahim Traoré blended into the quiet rhythms of the terminal across the expansive marble floor, a very different energy entered Gate 37. Sharp, impatient, and impossible to ignore. A powerful French CEO, polished and arrogant, arrived flanked by a small swarm of assistants who clutched tablets and briefcases like loyal foot soldiers. His presence disrupted the air itself. Where Traoré carried humility like a cloak, this man wore entitlement like armor. He was not used to waiting. He was not used to hearing the word no. And he certainly was not used to sharing space with those he deemed beneath him. As he approached the Air France counter, his voice sliced through the calm like a blade, sharp and demanding. His business class ticket was in order, but the situation was not to his liking. Apparently, due to overbooking and last-minute adjustments, the airline couldn't immediately seat him exactly where he wanted. The words, "business class is full," had barely left the attendant's lips before the CEO's face darkened with incredulity. Full? For him? He tapped his Italian leather shoes impatiently against the floor, his assistants murmuring behind him. To him, rules were for others, not for men of his influence. "I am a strategic partner in African projects," he screamed, loud enough for surrounding passengers to hear, as if that was supposed to open doors, as if that somehow justified shuffling others aside to make room for his importance. The airline staff scrambled, whispering frantically among themselves, refreshing their tablets, nervously adjusting their scarves. They weren't just afraid of losing a customer, they were afraid of losing a very powerful contact. Someone decided they needed someone senior, someone who could handle this situation without causing a scandal. And so they called Claire, the senior flight attendant. Sharp-eyed, immaculately dressed, trained to keep first-class clients satisfied no matter the cost. Claire moved swiftly to the scene, her polished heels clicking briskly across the floor. She listened carefully, hiding her irritation beneath a mask of professional calm. She knew what she was being asked to do. Find someone expendable, someone easy to move, someone who wouldn't create a fuss. Her eyes narrowed as she turned toward the plane. Already in her mind, she wasn't looking for mistakes in the system. She was looking for a target, a body to displace, a problem to be quietly solved. What she didn't realize was that the problem she was about to pick, the man she would single out, was no ordinary passenger. And what would begin as a quiet insult would soon grow into an international storm. Claire marched briskly down the jet bridge, her Air France uniform immaculate, her steps filled with purpose. She had handled difficult passengers before. She had even dealt with angry diplomats and temperamental celebrities. In her mind, this was just another inconvenience to smooth over. One quick adjustment, one quick shuffle, and the airline's precious guest, the CEO, would be satisfied. Her mission was clear: find someone movable, someone unlikely to resist or create headlines. She entered the business class cabin, her sharp eyes scanning the passengers with the practiced detachment of someone trained to assess worth at a glance. There they were, the tidy rows of professionals settling into their seats. A white-haired executive sipping coffee, a young woman tapping away at her laptop, a middle-aged European businessman checking his Rolex. Claire's gaze skimmed past them automatically. And then she saw him. Seat 2A, a man sitting quietly by the window. Dark-skinned, young, dressed simply in a dark hoodie and jeans. No gold watch gleaming on his wrist. No designer briefcase tucked beneath his seat. No fawning assistants trailing behind him. To Claire, it was an easy, almost subconscious conclusion. Probably a mistake, she muttered under her breath, adjusting the thin clipboard in her hand. Her decision was made not based on any boarding list or flight manifest, but on appearance alone. In her mind, a man who looked like that couldn't possibly be a paying business class passenger, and certainly not someone more important than her complaining French CEO. Masking her judgment with a thin, professional smile, Claire approached. "Bonjour, monsieur," she said, in the same strained politeness she used when dealing with minor inconveniences. "May I see your boarding pass?" Ibrahim Traoré, calm as ever, glanced up from his phone, his expression open and polite. He handed her the pass without hesitation. Claire barely glanced at it. Seat 2A, exactly as assigned, but the image in her head didn't match what she thought she should see. Still, she forced another smile and walked away, but the unease stayed with her. After a brief whisper to another flight attendant and a nod from the gate agent trying to handle the CEO's demands, she returned, this time with a manufactured tone of regret. "Sir," she said, as if sharing a small inconvenience, "we may need you to relocate to economy to accommodate another guest. We'll, of course, compensate you generously for the adjustment." It was framed politely, carefully, but the implication was as sharp as a slap. "You don't belong here. Move." Traoré raised a single eyebrow, a subtle gesture that carried the weight of mountains. "And why me?" he asked, his voice calm but curious, not yet angry, merely probing. Claire kept her fake smile glued in place. "No reason, sir. Just a small operational adjustment for another guest." There was quiet arrogance, the assumption that this man, whoever he was, could be displaced easily, conveniently, quietly. Traoré paused. He looked at her, not with confrontation, but with the kind of piercing patience that comes from someone who has faced far greater storms than a petty insult at 30,000 feet. "No," he said simply. I will remain in my seat." The words were spoken so softly that it took Claire a moment to realize he had refused her, refused them. A ripple of discomfort passed through her. She wasn't used to this, especially not from someone she had already categorized as lesser. She straightened up, her voice growing colder beneath its professional coating. "Sir, I must insist. It's for operational efficiency." But Traoré did not budge. He did not argue. He simply looked her in the eye, calm, steady, unshakable. Around them, a few passengers began to take notice. A man 2 rows behind lowered his newspaper slightly. A woman glanced over her laptop screen. No one spoke, but a silent tension began to weave through the cabin, crackling in the recycled air. Realizing that she was losing control of the situation, Claire turned her attention elsewhere. She began scanning for other easy targets. Other faces, she thought, could be displaced without complaint. Her method was shameless. She approached only the black passengers seated in business class, ignoring white travelers entirely. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos about little heard and untold news stories. Let's continue now. One by one, she leaned over and whispered requests to relocate to economy for operational needs, never offering detailed explanations, only the cold promise of compensation. One young African man, confused, asked her bluntly, "Why me?" Claire offered no real answer, only a tight smile and a mechanical nod. It wasn't just offensive anymore, it was systemic, visible, and ugly discrimination unfolding in real time, recorded not by cameras, but by 100 silent witnesses who felt the wrongness in their bones. And that's when Ibrahim Traoré stood up. There was no rage in his movements, no shouting, no theatrical anger, just a man standing calmly against a wave of casual racism, so common it was almost invisible to those committing it. His voice, when it came, was low but resonant, cutting through the cabin like a bell. "Enough." The word froze Claire mid-step. Passengers who had tried to look away found themselves staring. "You are making decisions based on skin," Traoré said, his tone still patient but loaded with an authority that made the air feel heavier. "Not on tickets. That is called discrimination." For a heartbeat, Claire tried to regain her footing. "Sir, please sit down," she said stiffly. "Please don't cause a scene." But the scene had already been caused, not by the man standing calmly before her, but by the arrogant assumptions woven into every word, every choice, every forced smile she had given. And deep inside the plane, beneath the quiet rumble of engines preparing for takeoff, something much bigger had begun. A reckoning, a quiet storm, a lesson that would soon echo across the world. For a long second after Ibrahim Traoré spoke, the cabin seemed to hold its breath. His words, simple, calm, undeniable, had cracked open the atmosphere like a thunderclap beneath the polite surface of luxury travel. Around him, some passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, pretending not to have heard. Others glanced sideways, nervous, guilty, curious. Claire, however, stiffened visibly, her forced smile slipping further with every second that passed. In her world, passengers, especially ones she had already judged by appearance, were supposed to be compliant. They were supposed to accept quiet humiliation in the name of operational adjustments. They were not supposed to resist, and certainly not like this, with dignity instead of rage, with poise instead of pleading. Claire tried to reassert control, hiding her shaken pride behind a brittle professionalism. "Sir, please," she said, her voice cooler now, tinged with impatience. "There's no need to make this into something it's not." But Traoré simply sat down, folding his hands neatly in his lap, refusing to escalate, refusing to back down. His silence was more powerful than any argument. It exposed everything she was trying to hide behind corporate smiles and protocol excuses. Still determined to force the outcome she wanted, Claire widened her search. She turned away from Traoré and continued down the aisle, choosing other targets. Again, All black travelers seated in business class. One by one, she leaned in, delivering the same hollow phrases. Would you mind moving to economy? It's just for operational reasons. We'll offer you a voucher. But by now, passengers were no longer blind to what was happening. They saw the pattern. They felt the imbalance. And though few spoke, the discomfort in the air was thick enough to taste. One young African professional, smartly dressed in a blue blazer, looked up with narrowed eyes as Claire requested he move. Why me? He asked bluntly, the same question Traoré had posed earlier. Once again, Claire had no real answer. Only awkward, mumbled excuses about seat availability. It wasn't an operational issue anymore. It was a pattern of exclusion, unfolding in full view of witnesses too polite or too afraid to call it by its name. And Traoré saw it all. He wasn't just watching her behavior. He was watching the cabin's silence, the passengers' complicity, the way even injustice could hide beneath the rituals of politeness. Inside him, the sadness was heavier than anger. He had fought on international stages to secure respect for African sovereignty, to remind the world that Africa was no longer anyone's stepping stone. And yet here, at 30,000 feet, the same old prejudices still slithered in the shadows of everyday life. But Traoré wasn't the kind of man who exploded in anger. His strength came from patience, from precision, and so he sat, anchored, unyielding, unbothered, letting Claire twist herself deeper into the web she had spun. Every step she took, every black passenger she harassed while ignoring their white counterparts, every weak excuse she offered became another silent testimony against her. The cabin became a silent court, and every eye that dared glance now saw the truth. This wasn't operational efficiency. It was discrimination, naked and shameful. And yet, Traoré said nothing more. He simply waited. Because he understood something Claire did not. Real power needs no shouting. It simply waits for the world to reveal itself. Far ahead in the airport, the French CEO was still being delayed at the gate, unaware of the storm brewing inside the plane. And soon, very soon, all the small insults, all the small humiliations would come crashing down, not just on Claire, but on everyone who believed that dignity could be sized up by the color of a man's skin or the simplicity of his clothes. The quiet resistance was in place. Now, all it needed was the right moment to strike. As Ibrahim Traoré sat silently in his window seat, the boarding door opened once again, and in swept the French CEO, surrounded by the murmuring attention of airline staff desperate to appease him. Claire rushed forward, a bright, obsequious smile pasted across her face, and greeted him as though royalty had arrived. She offered him a warm towel, champagne before takeoff, and endless nods of agreement as he spoke. The CEO chuckled arrogantly, boasting about his work in Africa to anyone who would listen, about the order he was supposedly bringing to the chaotic lands he was helping to civilize. His words dripped with colonial arrogance, layered with the unspoken belief that Africans should be grateful for his investments, his guidance, his presence. Claire leaned in, laughed at his jokes, and nodded approvingly, blind to the reality that the real architect of Burkina Faso's future sat just 2 rows away, watching in dignified silence. Traoré said nothing. He simply observed. He watched Claire, who had moments ago tried to shuffle him into economy like excess baggage, now treating a foreign opportunist like a king. He listened to the CEO's casual mockery, the sneering condescension with which he spoke of African lands and African people. But Traoré did not correct them. He did not reveal himself. Because sometimes true power is not in shouting down arrogance. It is in letting arrogance expose itself for the world to see. The hours passed slowly. Night surrendered to the thin gray light of dawn, and the Air France plane began its slow, steady descent toward Ouagadougou. In the cabin, the hum of conversation dulled to a low murmur. Seatbelts clicked into place. The flight attendants, still bustling around the CEO with practiced devotion, moved about making final checks. But outside the windows, something strange was unfolding. Instead of the usual sight of sleepy runways and distant city lights, Passengers saw rows of armored vehicles lined along the tarmac. Dozens of uniformed soldiers stood at rigid attention, their boots gleaming under the harsh morning sun. Beyond them, black SUVs waited in precise formation, and in the distance, government ministers in full ceremonial dress lined up near the terminal. Whispers began to ripple through the cabin. Is there a military operation happening? Are we landing into a crisis? The French CEO chuckled confidently to Claire, adjusting his tie as if preparing for a photo shoot. Must be for me, he smirked. After all, I'm quite important here. Claire laughed along, believing every word. She was already preparing to walk him out personally, imagining herself escorting this very important man past the crowds, basking in borrowed prestige. They had no idea. They couldn't feel it yet. But destiny was closing in, fast, silent, unstoppable, and soon, every illusion they held would be shattered on Burkinabe soil. The aircraft touched down with a soft rumble, taxiing slowly across the shimmering tarmac. Passengers stretched in their seats, gathering their belongings, preparing for a routine exit. Claire straightened her jacket, brushing her hair back behind her ear. The CEO stood up proudly, smoothing his expensive suit, expecting his grand welcome to begin at any moment.